Let me tell you the story about how I played on the greatest team in the greatest Rust event of all time. It all started with me using a rock to smash in the head of Aqua FPS.
Guys, make sure you bag yourselves over here when you make it.
Alright.
You see, today I would be playing in the Global Warfare 3 event hosted by FancyOrb. A 4-day long event with no limit on respawns, where 500 players are placed on a map recreating the Earth, with many of these players either being YouTubers or streamers. And so, teams would be formed based around real-world countries. And I, for one, was on the Egypt team, led by Keza and Confusion. So, having gotten an Africa spawn, I made my way over to where we were setting up the base. Making my way to the base spot, I looted a guy that someone else had killed, and then dropped off the resources for our builders to use. Now these guys knew exactly what the fuck they were doing, and our base quickly began getting put together. Every time I'd leave the base out on some short trip, I'd come back and it would look completely different from where I'd last seen it. As for the location of the base, we were set up right around here, which I know is pretty far from where Egypt actually is, and is more like Algeria or something, but Egypt is way cooler. So that's who we are. There was about 40 of us on the team, putting us up there amongst the larger teams on the server, though by no means the largest. Our only goal, frankly, was to survive and avoid getting raided. As of now though, we still had no clue of our neighbors. This location was chosen to put us right next to the custom-built quarry monument. This has no recycler and pretty bad barrel and crate spawns, but it's absolutely chock full of nodes, meaning we would have a very steady supply of sulfur, stone, and metal. Our closest recycler would be at Mining Outpost, only a couple grids north from us. And our closest actual source of loot would be Water Treatment Plant, where a couple of us had now gotten into a fight. So we started making our way over to help.
Bam, boy! Hey, one dead.
Okay. Yeah, you guys are brave, but now.
I hit him.
Custom. Push that guy, push that guy. Oh shit.
Customs hit again?
Hit the guy behind the barricade once. He's dead. With both sides suffering a few casualties, these interlopers were pushed back into the jungle. Later on, we would find out that this was a team led by T-Guy Tom, living just southeast of us. We would spend the next few hours engaged in occasional skirmishes with them, with our team usually coming out on top. Deciding that this area was too hot, T-Guy Tom had his whole team pack up their bags and simply leave, leaving us with entirely uncontested control over water treatment. About an hour after this, the team to our east, the Saudi Arabians, decided to, for whatever reason, rage quit the event. And a short while after that, I accompanied the team as we went and raided some troublemakers based out of southern Spain. With these guys out of the picture, we had solidified our control over the majority of Africa. Now that's not to say we could stop people from getting onto Africa. I mean, there's after all 4 separate bridges linking it to different continents. But anywhere within the green was basically our territory, and we'd have home turf advantage. And at this point within the event, our base was starting to take its final shape. Now I wish I could explain to you how exactly these guys managed to make some of these insane peaks. Like, I don't even know how you make little gaps like these in a fucking building. If it's anything past a 2x2, it's well beyond my pay grade. So basically, we had a good ass base, and that's about all I understood about it. And then to the west of our main base, we had a pretty cool pyramid building. It didn't really serve any purpose, but if you're the Egypt team, you gotta have a big ass pyramid, right? And it was good that our main base was in such a good state, because soon after this, Coconut B, the leader of the very large Ook team based in North America, no, I don't know what that stands for either, would come flying through Africa in search of a specific player. While in Africa, he would find a sleeping player somehow flying in the sky. He began killing the flying sleeper. However, he was close enough to base that there were a couple people nearby that heard him shooting, and thinking this might be a hostile player, they did the only reasonable thing they could.
Okay, we're raiding fucking Egypt. We're going to Egypt right fucking now.
And these were the shots heard around the world. With a single magazine from a Tommy, the fate of the whole server had changed. Some real assassination of Franz Ferdinand type shit. And just like that event had far unforeseeable consequences, so too with this one. But for now, All that we knew was that Coconut B was leading the Ook team on their way to come and raid us. In base, we scrambled to prepare, putting on the best gear and equipment that we could find. We took our positions around the base and prepared. I personally joined a few others near the pyramid. A short distance away from the base, we would be the first ones to come in contact with the enemy, and it would come down to us to slow them down as much as we could.
Hey, they're coming, bridge, so many,
310, there's so many!
Still behind us.
A fierce gunfight began between our two groups, and an enemy attack heli began strafing those at base. Soon after this began, however, night fell upon the land, and so under the cover of darkness, Coconut B began rotating around the base counterclockwise, looking for any weak point to attack from. Ultimately, however, he would find none.
It's a hard fucking raid. Look at that.
And he and the rest of his team would simply pack up their bags and return the same way they had come, having completely circumnavigated our base. Through a combination of our effective response and having a pretty built-up base, we had managed to scare off one of the bigger teams on the server. Despite that, however, things were not all hunky-dory. Coconut B's team was now our sworn enemies, and occasionally they would come by in large groups to come pillage our lands. Most of these raids would be pretty short term and inflict minimal damage, and in fact we were able to push off a couple of these. However, things got a lot more serious when a big group of them was spotted on the bridge linking us to South America. Everyone that was in the area, me included, ran over as fast as we could to hold them back at this choke point.
West? Wait, where?
He said.
Coming off the bridge, the Ooks had been hemmed in. With very little cover to be found, they were forced to bunch together. Even worse for them, me and a couple Egyptians had seized the cliffs overlooking their position, allowing us to easily fire down on them.
I headshot AK.
It's rocket.
Oh no, that's not.
We were pushing the Ooks back, but they had air support.
Killed AK. Is
that not us?
Do you have a extra kit? Kills?
Rockets.
Oh, sure,
me. Oh wait, there was a message
Thank you so much. One of the boys had picked me up, but barely alive, I took a step back to heal.
Hit markers.
I think we're wiped. We didn't have everybody.
Have the windows broken?
It's okay, we have other ones.
Now who exactly is this strapping young fellow Coconut B just snuck up upon? Once I healed up and returned to the fray, I saw that the battle was already won. The Ook team had been pushed back into the sea, and with this final battle, we had solidified our control over Africa. With this concluded, we were able to spend the next couple of hours peacefully farming and upgrading our base, which after all the action, was a respite that we desperately needed. After this, the first UN meeting took place. A meeting where the leaders of every country were invited to plead their case to all others. Most of the Egypt team ended up watching Confusion's screen share of him attending the meeting, where he just spent most of the time trying to play rock, paper, scissors while the meeting was going on.
You don't know what is happening in South America. Shut the fuck up, bro. No, bro. I never came to Antarctic.
There's just something so fucking funny about doing rock, paper, scissors matches while there's like a heated argument going on in the background. And frankly, most of the team watching was a lot more concerned with the outcome of the rock, paper, scissors matches than the fucking arguments. But despite one of our leaders kind of just fucking around, we now had a good understanding of all the major players on the server. All major countries were split into basically two sides, those who stood with Coconut B and the coalition that stood against him. Everybody had their own reasons for which side they were on. Canada and Mexico were so close to Coconut B that they came under his direct influence and were some of his most steadfast allies. The two teams down in Argentina and Brazil, however, fucking despised Mexico for whatever reason, and because Mexico is the ally of Coconut B, they now despise Coconut B too. But back in North America, a small group of rebels, led by a man named Redicus, opposed the results of the election that had put Coconut B in power. By all accounts, this election was almost certainly legitimate. Coconut B was a genuinely very popular figure, but the fact that there was a group claiming that Coconut B had usurped power meant that the UN now stood against Coconut B. Now, it didn't particularly matter whether the UN legitimately believed the election had been rigged or not. All that mattered is they now had a justification to stand against him. And with the UN came the multiple European teams, the United Kingdom, Norway, Italy, and Germany, who together formed the European Union, which is kind of funny because half of those countries aren't even in the actual EU. As for us in Egypt, since our only goal was to survive, it only made sense for us to stand with the coalition opposing the only guy who's tried to raid us so far. Now, as for the giant Russian team, they had joined the coalition because of their deep vendetta against the Chinese and Japanese team, who both had good relations with Coconut B. And finally, down in good old Australia, there were two teams of roughly equal size warring it out with each other. One of them was simply the Australian team, and the other team was called the Wieners, spelled W-E-N-R, like a fucking Call of Duty clan tag. Which, if I can take a short aside, when I was about 10 years old, I started playing Black Ops 2, but I didn't want people to know I was like a kid playing on there. So to show that I was like a full-grown adult, I made my clan tag Man, just M-A-N. You know, I was a pretty stupid kid, and think of it now, I'm still pretty stupid. But with that little tangent aside, the scene was now set for the Great War to begin, and with that, the first day drew to a close. Logging in on day 2, I found that I had temporarily been kicked out of the team UI. Now, because you could only fit a certain number of players in it, as some of our other members had hopped on while I was asleep, I'd been kicked out to make space for them. But unfortunately, when I hopped on, nobody that had privileges to add people back into the team was online. This meant that anyone on the Egypt team looking at me wouldn't see a green name above my head, and I wouldn't see one above theirs. So friendly fire was basically guaranteed. And so I decided now would not be a bad time to simply wander around the earth. I became a traveler in a not so antique land. I first made my way around Western Europe. What fucking flag is that? After that, I made the long and pretty cold trek down to China. What's up, boys? Continuing my journey, I made my way to Japan. And Japan just seemed like a really chill team, so I found a jackhammer nearby and just farmed an inventory full of resources and gave it to them.
Hi.
I come from Egypt, bearing gifts.
Come over.
Okay. Following her, I was led to who else but a fellow fucking Egyptian. Unbeknownst to me, this guy, Harris Bogart, had apparently gone on a one-man diplomatic mission to Japan. And because he knew a bit of Japanese, he was having some serious success. In fact, that's a little bit of an understatement, because they had crowned him the Emperor of Japan. Now luckily this was mostly ceremonial, and Harris's loyalty remained with Egypt, so we managed to avoid a Bernadotte situation. But you might also be wondering why we're able to have such good relations with Japan, when in theory we should be at war with them. Well, the thing is, this isn't like high school, right? Just because we have a problem with Coconut B doesn't mean we have to take it up with all of his friends. And because of that, we actually ended up having a pretty decent relationship with China and Japan. So good in fact that me and Harris boarded a boat with 3 of the Japanese team on board and set a course to go back home to Egypt to give him a tour around. Along the way, I was gifted a hat by the Japanese team, which of course I put on immediately. And then finally we made landfall on Africa. We led them further inland and showed off the base. And Harris even taught me a little bit of Japanese.
No, Trafalgar, no.
And after this tour, the Japanese had to return to their base. But overall, this had gone quite well. I hadn't been expecting to find another fucking Egyptian, much less take a tour around our home with what is supposed to be our enemy, but this unintended little diplomatic mission had been a great success. Right around this point, someone that had the ability to add me back into the team hopped online, and so I was added back to the team. However, I was on my mysterious wanderer arc, so I once again made my way up to Western Europe and just started wandering around. I came across the King of Liechtenstein.
I'm the richest man in Liechtenstein. I'm also the poorest.
And after a very generous donation of 20 cloth, I was deemed the first knight of Liechtenstein. Further east, I came across another single guy country in a dude representing Hungary. And after that, I shot up north to the lighthouse to do a little bit of recycling, where I came across one of the guys on the English team. He ended up disconnecting right next to the recycler, so I made sure to watch over his body until he got back.
Wow, holy smokes, dude. Yeah, bro, that's so honorable right there, man. I guaranteed my Discord buddies that I was gonna probably wake up with nothing. But yeah, I crashed out, dude. That's so cool. Thank you.
And then finally, I made my way up to Iceland. This whole time, I hadn't been shot at by anybody. It seems like our relationship with Europe was fucking excellent. Now, up near the coast of Iceland, I found Wellen working on a replica of the Titanic. I gave him a bit of scrap, and before long...
Welcome to second class cabin,
let's
sir.
fucking go! I had a second class room on the Titanic. I think it was mostly like the third class passengers that died, so I was sitting pretty chill up here, you know? However, I wouldn't get to enjoy this for long, as we had just received word that Coconut B had mounted a lightning fast raid against the UN. So I respawned at base and joined those gearing up to go help him. As soon as we were ready, we crammed into a couple scrap helis and took off. The entire way there, we were scanning the skyline to see who else would join us in helping the UN, but we found nobody. We would be alone. We landed the helis a short distance south of the raid and began running over to help.
UN is kill inside. So we're killing inside.
We didn't know it at the time, but we had walked right into an ambush, and we started getting picked off one by one. We were cut down to a man. By the time we'd gotten there, Coconut B had already finished up the raid and been ready to intercept us. And with that defeat, we had lost some of our best gear, which we had a great shortage of. This whole ordeal had been a decisive defeat. Although it was frankly a little disappointing that we had been the only ones to seemingly stand up for the UN, the situation wasn't the end of the world. The UN was by far the weakest team of the coalition, and it wouldn't necessarily take too long for them to rebuild. However, when later the Ooks began attacking Australia, the penny dropped. They were simply working their way up from the weakest teams of the coalition to the strongest. And so we now all knew that it was imperative that we stopped him here. We again repeated our actions, grabbing gear, boarding on scrap helis, and making our way down to Australia. However, this time we were joined directly by the South American teams. And again, learning from our mistakes, this time we set up a FOB, a place we could store our beds for respawn and extra guns. With that in place, we began making our way up north. By the time we started moving on the Ooks raid bases, they had already blown into Australia and were currently packing up the loot. It was too late to save the base of Australia, but what we could do now was kill the Ooks as they were leaving the base with loot. And so we started moving in to do exactly that. With some of the outside stragglers picked off, we moved in on the raid base of the Ooks.
Wait, yo, who's that? Oh my god. We've enemies, we've enemies!
Yo, there's like a fucking million coming.
There's a million.
The Ook team's initial positions were quickly overwhelmed.
What the hell?
Respawning in their FOBs, a brutal fight began. Gear and equipment quickly became scattered, and the fight devolved into multiple grubs fighting over the same gun. It was complete and utter chaos.
Oh fuck, it's war.
Our skirmishing with the Ook team was starting to have some serious effect, so a few of them were sent towards our FOB to disrupt the ability of respawners to join back into the fight. We had to take care of these guys at all costs.
We all just run base.
He's in the water right now.
Got him. A short bit after this, another one of their guys would try coming into our base. Seeing that he had killed me from the airlock, I spawned on my outside bag and shut him in.
Get him on top.
Due to the chaotic nature of the fighting, although there was 3 of us here, there was only fucking 1 gun between all of us. So we had to get a little creative with our strategy.
I'll bait. I'll walk in and he'll shoot me.
He's done.
Good
Nice,
shit.
dude. But finally, after a long and brutal fight lasting multiple day and night cycles, the coalition side had come out on top. The raid bases of the Ooks were blown into, and they were pushed off the Australian continent. They had paid dearly for their attack, but so had we. This was a Pyrrhic victory. After this, Australia's base was in a rough state and it would take them quite a while to repair. However, the influx of gear we'd gotten off the Ooks meant that we were essentially back to full strength. And with the Ooks now on the back foot and their plan made clear to everyone, there was really only one thing to be done. We had to go on the offense. So there was a meeting of all the major coalition leaders where a plan was hammered out. While this was going on, us rank and file took the time to place bags near the Ooks base, making sure not to get spotted so they'd have no idea we were coming. Once the leaders had agreed on the attack, we loaded onto scrap helis and set off. The plan was simple. The two Latin American teams would attack Mexico, meaning they'd be unable to aid Coconut B. This would leave us, Russia, the UN, and the EU for the attack against the Ooks. We'd place FOBs surrounding the Ooks. That way, if one of the attacks stalled out, the others could pick up the slack. We had the dubious honor of being the first ones to make contact with the enemy. Basically, our job would be to survive as long as we possibly could as the entire enemy team bore down upon us, which would then allow our allies to set up their FOBs. Every team had their own color scheme. Ours was yellow and black, and the Ooks would be dressed mainly in pink. But as the fight would rage on, this would become more and more muddled. This was going to be rough, but there was a lot of people counting on us, so we went straight in.
Everybody land in this little green patch right here. Go west, go west, go west, go west. We're good, we're good.
In a stroke of immensely poor luck, our fleet had been spotted in the approach, and in completely uncontested airspace, Ook helicopters rained hell upon us.
Pick bomb him! Pick bomb him! Bomb him!
Watch out, watch out, watch out!
These rockets found their mark. Many of us lay dead, but all the same we pressed on. We needed to move up to our FOB spot and start building. I'd been knocked down and was forced to crawl to safety, passing by some of the bodies of my comrades. But no matter how brutal the fighting would get, us Egyptians would always stand together. I was quickly picked up, and retrieving my gun, I got back in the fight.
You're rocketing us.
I'm dead to fucking HVs, man. I'm dead.
Don't worry about it.
We were in a very shitty position. The main force of the Ooks controlled the cliffs overlooking our position, and their helicopters could take shots at us at their leisure. The situation was becoming near untenable, but in just a moment, it would become a lot worse. Hanging near the back of the group, I'd been shot in the back. This would mark the entry of Canada into this battle. Although they were one of the weakest teams on the server, approaching from the northeast, we were now completely surrounded. Outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded, we couldn't last much longer.
Wait, Faded, you have the doors on your body.
Two more dead, two more dead.
Yeah, I have the doors on my body. I fucking got...
After being killed, we would try to run back and grab our gear, but most of the time we'd be intercepted and killed by the Ooks. And whenever we did make it back, the gear remaining would become worse and worse. We were just about to reach our breaking point and be completely destroyed when Coconut B respawned near the south of his base and saw something.
Wait, they're all here. Wait.
Because the entire Ook team had been focused on destroying us, the Russians had been able to set up a FOB literally as close as possible to the Ooks base, completely uncontested. And now that they were in a golden position, they got to work. With the Ooks base now being pummeled from the south side, the majority of their forces turned around and began heading back to base. This reduced level of opposition now allowed us to finally build our FOB. And with the Ooks mostly out of the picture, we now had our opportunity to take revenge against the Canadians. The Canadians completely routed, we were able to regroup at our FOB. All the meanwhile, Russian and UN rockets continued to rain upon the Ooks base. Once we were all grouped together and once again geared back up, we moved up towards the Ook base and set up a new FOB within rocket range of them. And so, the Ooks, already struggling to contain the south side of their base, now began receiving rockets from the north.
I'm going to check, Faded. I'm going to check.
With this additional pressure on the Ooks, they crumbled. Before long, grubs were running around in their base looting their boxes, and a short while after that, their whole base had been pummeled into fucking oblivion. Heaven only knows how this thing's still standing. At this point, with the ooks completely driven off, we were free to loot at our heart's content. Every team claiming their bounty for what had been a very difficult fight. But it was over. We had won. The Scourge of America was complete. America and Mexico had been completely raided. Canada, meanwhile, was deemed so insignificant that they were left to their own devices. That whole fight had been pretty sketchy, and we'd come incredibly close to complete destruction. But we had done our job, which meant our allies had been able to do theirs. The Ooks in Mexico were greatly damaged by this attack. So damaged, in fact, that the Ook team didn't think it was worth rebuilding. Instead, they carried everything they could down to Antarctica, where they would start anew. As for the coalition, we took a couple hours to rest on our laurels. But once that was done, those of us at Egypt thought it best to continue our momentum. We planned to do an attack against T-Guy Tom, who we were told was living somewhere down in South America. But before the attack could begin, we noticed that there was hardly any of his members left online, and so we decided against attacking them for now. It would just be kind of cheap to raid someone when most of their team is offline. Instead, we looked back to North America. The removal of Coconut B had left a giant power vacuum, which could easily be swallowed up by the rebel American team, who are frankly a dangerous and unreliable element. They could easily become the next Coconut B, and so our leaders thought it best to take them out of the picture. As a smaller scale attack, there was no need for us to use scrap helis. We made our way on foot under the cover of darkness. Once we got there, we set up a fob south of their base. This raid was mostly uneventful except for two factors. One of them was Lucky Llama flying around in an armored hot air balloon taking shots at us. Now granted, this is pretty fucking funny, but a little bit less so when you're on the receiving end of his bullets. Although even then you can't get mad because it's still pretty fucking funny. And the second was a bunch of strange men just coming out of the woods south of us. Now at first they were naked and presented little danger. But as the fight progressed, more and more of them would show up and they'd be more and more geared. God only knows who these guys were. Maybe it was the Mexico team heading up north to get a little revenge, or maybe some Waco-style militia freaks out in the woods. We are in the Pacific Northwest after all. But all the same, by the time we were finishing up on the raid, the amount of people emerging out of the woods was almost unstoppable. With the raid complete and loot now ours, we started making a hasty evac. The woodsmen now truly beginning to overwhelm us. We were harassed the entire way back. Some of us would fall, knocked down by the volley of bullets lobbed at us, but we always made sure to stop and pick them up. And in this way, we were able to stay organized as we withdrew from the situation. If we'd split up into little groups, we would have been swarmed and fucked. Making our way back home intact, this was another decisive victory to add to our pile. And so now, with most of our enemies completely crushed, our original goal of simply surviving seemed more and more likely. And with that, day 2 drew to a close. Day 3 started off peacefully enough. Although we still had plenty of gear, we'd used a lot of our materials yesterday, so it was time to restock them. After this, I even made a trip to the Russian team and practiced my very shitty Russian. Я из Ameriki. While this was going on, in some dark recess of the world, a meeting was taking place.
Now you're all here gathered today for one reason and one reason only. We declare that Egypt is no longer welcome here, and today they will fall.
But we had no idea of this. So at base, it was business as usual, until something was spotted on the horizon. A large force of enemies was approaching us, in good order and well armed and armored. This didn't make any sense. How had Coconut B been able to rearm his forces so quickly? But all the same, we prepared to defend our base, when we realized this wasn't Coconut B at all. This was the Coalition. Arrayed outside in their great number and splendor, they had decided that with Coconut B dealt with, now it was our turn. Perhaps we had only been allies for as long as we were useful against Coconut B, and with him now out of the picture, this was just them tying up loose ends. Each team facing us was a Brutus in their own right. The Russians, who had had the easiest raid of all time against Coconut B because of our sacrifice. The UN, who we had faced a much larger team to try to protect. The EU, who we thought of as our closest ally. Whatever their reasons or their motives, we didn't care. We weren't gonna go easy. We stored multiple boxes of rockets in case we came under attack, and now seemed like a perfect opportunity to use them. The Russians began pushing a fob dangerously close to our base, so all those with rockets focused on them.
Pre-dead on your left.
No, they're running out.
The Russian fob was completely destroyed. We were actually pushing them back. While this had been happening, however, the EU team had been active. They'd pushed up further and continued lobbing rockets at us, and they were starting to breach into our base. However, thanks to the work of a few brave sealers in the base, we were able to limit the damage this did. And with those who were armed with rockets now free, we turned our attention to the Europeans.
Just using a fucking police week.
Where am I?
North of us. Just spam your rockets. Roll.
Alter, ich habe einen 5 Invalid gegeben, Digga.
Ich bin dead, ich rocket again.
With concentrated rocket fire, the European team was also pushed back. These bastards had underestimated us. The enemies needed to pull back to regroup, and so this gave us the opportunity to repair our base. By the time the traitors were ready to strike again, we had mostly undone the damage they had caused us. The battle was now truly beginning to take the characteristics of a siege, with a seemingly infinite number of barricades and small bases dotting the landscape. However, this time they had a slightly different plan. While the Russians and a section of the European team would attack like they had before, this time the Italians would break off, flanking south. From there, they would seek to break into the pyramid and turn it into their own raid base, thus opening up a completely new angle of attack. While most of the team was distracted by the northern attack, a few of us turned our attention towards the pyramids. There wasn't going to be enough of us to stop them from taking it over, but all we had to do was stall it out long enough for the northern attack to fail.
Pyramid. Pyramid.
One more dead on pyramid. Because those attacking the base were on bag timers, even just killing them would be enough to stall their progress.
Get them in here. We've taken the pyramids.
Hearing the leader of the Italian team take a victory lap after blowing off only a few doors of the pyramid, I knew it was my time to go in.
We have control of the pyramids. This is all beating it all down.
Under the cover of both darkness and rain, now I knew it was my chance to sow confusion in their ranks. Going in and out of the pyramid as I pleased, killing as many as I could, it didn't matter if they had gear or not. If they were on a respawn timer, they couldn't push our base, and so I kept just picking off anybody that I could. The situation was so confusing to them that they were even shooting their own fucking guys. With their control of the pyramid solidifying, they now had their entrance covered by a door. However, knowing who their allies in this attack were, I came up with a little bit of a scheme. Mój druk, Russia, let me in.
Let Russia in. Let Russia inside. Let them inside.
Come, go.
Я русский. I'm Russian, man, I'm Russian.
Name.
I can't believe that fucking trick worked twice. Not only had this little trick gotten me a couple free kills, but now it would make the Italians much more likely to friendly fire on their Russian allies. It seems that a few Italians had tried to pick up my trick of just shotgun bum rushing, but it hadn't worked out. In fact, at this point in the raid, nothing was working out for them. The pyramid still wasn't fully secured and was contributing nothing to the raid. The rest of the EU team, however, was starting to lose steam. Some of the players, most of them being from the Germany team, had given up on the raid altogether. They were already back at base just farming. With this greatly reduced pressure from the northwest direction, we could focus much more of our efforts towards the Russians in the northeast. If we could expel the Russians, we would easily be able to push over all other teams. The battle was hard fought. With every Russian we killed, so too was an Egyptian, but we were slowly making progress on them.
Boys, Isaiah, rocket that hoe.
I'm in.
Oh, Isaiah's
I'm just gonna keep sealing up, okay? It's not gonna be good seals, but it'll be fine.
Yeah.
things weren't exactly going well for the Russians.
Короче, блядь, пизду, мы тут с тобой, блядь, остались, нахуй. Это ебаный металл, блядь, херово, ну то запрыгнуть, сука, нереально, блядь.
Seeing the way the wind was blowing in this battle, the UN called a meeting of all the leaders of the coalition while the Russians held down the fort. And in this most foul of meetings, the UN was able to draw fresh commitments from all those in the battle. They'd be coming back with more rockets and more gear. But worst of all, through whatever detestable means, the UN was able to draw in the 2 South American teams to this battle. This giant influx of fresh troops meant we were fucked. The battle quickly began slipping from our hands.
Yeah, we know.
Kill him, I killed him.
The influx of the South Americans helped turn the tide in the battle for the pyramid. They now had complete control of it. And with this last development, our fate was sealed. We were completely outnumbered and surrounded from all sides. This is where it would all end, backstabbed by our allies. In fact, at this point, Coconut Bee was getting involved.
We're not taking the camper vans, we're taking a Scrappy. Let's roll. We have 30 minutes.
They took scrap helis and flew all the way to Africa. However, they weren't coming as an enemy, but as a friend.
Let's go!
Landing at the south of our base, they wrapped around the quarry monument, much as they had done when they had come to raid us, and appeared behind the Russians, who now finding themselves surrounded on both sides, were quickly crushed.
Да, блядь, сука! Откуда, блядь?
Я тебя разлутаю.
By the time the Russian team was dealt with, the Chinese and the Japanese had joined the fray on our side. Landing in the far west, this left all those remaining coalition members completely surrounded. And when it was their turn to be surrounded, they didn't fare so well. The last holdout remaining was in the pyramids, and we took extra joy in rooting those bastards out. With the help of our newfound allies, we reigned triumphant over the field of battle. This was a heroic victory. Needless to say, after this battle, our allegiance switched. The guy who we had thought of as our main enemy had come to save us from our allies. A true role reversal. But despite our new allies and enemies, our goal remained simply the same, to survive. The rest of day 3 passed by peacefully enough. The only exclusion to this being a small rocket event that was taking place a bit south of us. Basically, it's a supply drop that would spawn 1 rocket every minute for the next hour. We contested the Russians in this event, but overall, except for one cool shotgun play I made.
What?
Yeah.
Dude, they can't fight without...
It was a wash. The rockets were split basically evenly between us, which, although is not perfect, it certainly beats our enemies getting all of the rockets. And yes, that is Lucky Llama up in one of those fucking balloons taking pot shots at us. But with that, day 3 drew to a close, and so began the final and most tumultuous day yet. Day 4 started off with the announcement that 3 nukes would be spawned across the map. Somewhere in the west would spawn the yellow nuke, a nuke that will highlight your position to the entire server and can't be carried when in a vehicle. Somewhere in the middle would spawn the red nuke, the same as the yellow nuke, except it can be carried in vehicles. And in the eastern section of the map, somewhere would spawn the stealth nuke. You can't go in vehicles with this, but unlike the other nukes, your position isn't tracked on the map. Now, some of these nukes were clearly far better than others. I mean, the yellow nuke is just a shittier red nuke, and the stealth nuke is crazy powerful. Now, additionally, the nukes could only be used 2 hours after they'd been claimed, meaning there was a lot of opportunity for counterplay with every nuke except the fucking stealth nuke. And it was at this point that the Russians did something kind of cheap. Early in the day, before the nukes spawned, they attacked the Chinese and Japanese team, clearly hoping to get rid of them so they could more easily grab the nuke. But see, here's the thing. Most of the Russian players are actually from Russia, so they're in a time zone that's about 8 or 10 hours ahead of most NA players. Whereas the Chinese team was mostly comprised of actually Americans. And so by attacking early, all of the Russian team was on and barely any of the Chinese team was. Additionally, when the Japanese were attacked, all of their allies, us included, were in teams that are mostly comprised of North American players, meaning there just wasn't enough of us online at the time to help. And so the Japanese team, who in large part relied on their allies to survive, were basically fucked because most of our teams were simply offline. Again, this whole scheme was kind of a low blow, and like most low blows, it was very effective. The Japanese and Chinese teams were completely crushed. These teams would attempt to rebuild, but the Russians would always destroy them before they could really get a foothold. And so the only sensible option now was for the Japanese and the Chinese to pack up whatever little scraps they had left and set up base in Africa near us. As the skies darkened overhead and the nuke event would soon begin, every team was making their final preparations. Once everyone was fully suited up, we gathered outside. As soon as the location of the nukes were revealed, we'd use everything we could to secure the one that would spawn in our zone. And outside, I found the Japanese speaking with who else but Harris Bogart. The circumstances of this second meeting were very different. Our first meeting had been full of hope and eagerness for the future, but now here we were, staring down the barrel of total destruction. But hey, at least I got to hear one of them try to pronounce my name. Soon after this, the location of the nukes was revealed. The yellow nuke had landed deep in the Amazon forest. There was no way our side was going to get our hands on it. It was a similar story for the ghost nuke. With the Japanese and Chinese team out of the picture, it was basically a shoo-in that the Russians would secure it. And so it was of the utmost importance that we secure the red nuke, which had spawned further down in Africa. We hopped in whatever vehicles we had on hand and made our way over there as fast as we could. The lag from so many people in one place caused us to crash our van. We had to proceed on foot. Securing the nuke, it would be 2 hours before we could use this, so we began heading north going back to base. Along the way, a few EU attack helis began strafing our position. We shot down those that we could, kept moving. Just outside of base, we stepped into an ambush. The EU team knew exactly where we were going and had headed south to intercept us. Parked just outside our base, there was no way to get around this. We'd have to go straight through them.
Stop. Let people go ahead. Keep going. They're across the board.
Two more dead.
Oh my god, they're 8 closest gate right now. Get in. There we go.
We had successfully secured the nuke. The last of the EU team around our base was driven off. And it was an immense stroke of good luck that we had secured the red nuke, as the yellow nuke had been secured by the Argentinian team, and the stealth nuke was off somewhere with the Russians. It would be 2 hours until any of these nukes could be used, and seeing as we still owed Coconut B for basically having saved our base, it was deemed only right that we would give him the red nuke. And so in a meeting between our leaders, the nuke was exchanged, and Coconut B took the nuke back to his Antarctica base. From there was nothing we could do but bide our time until the nukes could be used. And nobody tells you this, but in situations like this is by far the worst part. Waiting around and knowing that 2 hours from now, you will either have survived against all odds, or your base will be reduced to nothing but radioactive rubble. As the time for the nuke activation drew nearer, we could see that the yellow nuke was still safely in the Latin American base, far away from us. And remember, that one can only be carried on foot, so we would have very advanced warning if it was heading to our position. The stealth nuke was by far the more pressing matter. There was no way to know where it was. All we knew was that it was out there somewhere in the hands of the Russians. And since it could entirely destroy a base from far away, we were left with no choice but to try to cover every entry route into Africa. This was an incredible long shot and we were spread thin. There was only 3 or 4 people at every entry point, but left with literally no other way to try to stop this nuke, we manned our positions. The enemies could come from anywhere. I joined Vincent SMG and another guy guarding the bridge coming down to Africa from Europe, and it was at this vantage point from which we would see something truly sickening.
We can defend both the nukes now. What?
No, because one of them's able to be flown in.
Oh my god.
Holy shit!
No way.
Oh my god.
That's so
GG guys. GG chat. We tried, bro. GG chat.
The Ook team had been nuked. Their base was completely destroyed, and anyone in the area was slowly killed by radiation. You see, as the nuke timer had been counting down, the Russians had simply bided their time in the water, completely undetectable. And using scuba sets, they were able to swim up and just wait right outside the Ook main base, and call in a nuke as soon as it was possible. Perhaps even worse than this, only a few minutes before having their base completely destroyed, the Ooks had taken the red nuke out on a helicopter to push for the Latin American base. But Coconut B carrying the nuke had been intercepted and killed by the Russian team, and so the nuke fell deep into the ocean below. And guess who was already in the area with scuba sets on them? That's right, the Russians. And so straight after having used the stealth nuke, they scrounged the red nuke off the ocean floor. We were clearly their next target. The guy carrying the nuke began heading north. Their plan was obvious: make their way to the closest piece of land, get on a helicopter, and fly the nuke straight into our base. So we all abandoned our roadblocks and began heading south. And so as soon as the Russians tried emerging out of the ocean at Madagascar, we had a few guys waiting for them. By securing Madagascar, we prevented the coalition from getting on a heli and escaping. This allowed our allies in the water to catch up and to begin a pell-mell fight deep underwater, both sides using every jackhammer, spear gun, and submarine they could get their hands on. The entire server was here fighting over this one nuke. Countless would fall, and countless more would take their place. The nuke constantly changing hands between the two sides. Although meanwhile, their fight continued moving south. We followed them on the shore, pushing aside all enemies along the way, ensuring they wouldn't be able to get away on land. And the fight continued this way all the way down to the very bottom of Africa. One of our allies was able to secure the nuke long enough to hover a heli just above the water and board it. From there, the enemy's fate was sealed. They made a beeline towards Latin America, who did everything they could to try to stop them, but it was hopeless. The red nuke was dropped on their position.
No.
Se pasaron por al lado de la SAM de la gente.
With the Latin American base completely obliterated, the final of the nukes, the yellow one, was up for grabs. Victory was finally in sight for us. All we had to do was make sure that nuke didn't get called on our base, and our goal of surviving would be accomplished. The Latin Americans began taking the yellow nuke up north, and so every one of every team started making their way over. By the time the majority of us Egyptians had reached where the nuke was, the fighting had devolved into a chaotic brawl, much like it had been in the water. Everybody was throwing themselves at the nuke just to carry it 10 feet further, and at one point, I found myself in those shoes.
Yo, whoever has it, just
Find it, dude.
There's a certain poetic irony to this. Last time me and Coconut B had been this close face to face, he'd been trying to use a rock to smash my head in. And now here we were, on the same side, looking for the same nuke, which I had the mispleasure of actually finding. I was able to carry it a small distance east before I was gunned down. And shortly after this, the Russian team had been able to temporarily gain control of the nuke. Realizing the tides could once again shift and the nukes might fall into our hands, and thus their base might be in danger, they instead decided to call it down on the nearby Mexico base. And with this, we had succeeded. By copping out and blowing up a, no offense to Mexico, mostly irrelevant team, the Russians had ensured our survival. In an event full of teams getting destroyed, we were one of the few to make it out unscathed. Throughout these past 4 days, we'd met interesting people, gone on impetuous attacks, gotten backstabbed by the people we considered our allies, got saved by the people we considered our enemies, fought in world-spanning conflicts, refused to back down against impossible odds, and through it all, Egypt still stood. For my first time ever playing one of these global warfare events, I couldn't have asked for a better team. With the limited time left in day 4, the leaders of our team put on an award ceremony to celebrate those who had performed best on the team. Now obviously I wasn't included in this because my greatest contribution to the team was just being a shotgun shitter when they were raiding us. But with this done, it was time for the event to end, and as sort of a tribute to the base that had survived the most punishment on the server, it was deconstructed right in front of us by the admins. Nothing less would have been enough to take us out.
I'm going in.
Cheerios right here. Cheerios here for some reason.
Dude, did we kill him?
Yes, Cheerios literally my orange.
And with all our loot now on bags on the floor, we spent some well-earned time shooting each other. My final act was igniting a hot air balloon that crashed nearby, and upon seeing Lucky Llama hop in like some fucking fairy tale, I passed him the L9.
Getting shot by my own team.
Thank you to FancyOrb and team for putting on a cool event and letting me play in it. Especially since my Discord account is fucking called Albert12362. I very much so appreciate you guys having the patience to verify I was actually who I said I was instead of, you know, what I would have done and just ignore the fucking message. Also, thank you to Keza and Confusion, as well as everyone else on the Egyptian team for having me. I couldn't have asked for a better team. And then of course, thank you for watching. I've made a couple ARC event videos before and you guys seem to like those, and I hope you enjoyed this one just as much. With an extra special thank you to my YouTube members.